Have you ever had to quit something that you loved, you thought brought you a lot of joy, but either the way it made you feel mentally or emotionally or even physically, you just had to say, I can't do this anymore? And I ask because apparently if you're bad at fantasy football, it can be bad for your mental health. They've done studies about this, and the people who suck at fantasy football, apparently it brings them very, very low.
I've certainly been at a sports bar and witnessed that. Like, you can tell the guys who aren't doing well with their fantasy team, and they're like sweating, they're like getting real red, freaking out, just yelling random expletives the whole day.
So I play fantasy football. I'm not good at it. I don't pay enough attention to it to be good at it, but I do it every year because I like the camaraderie of my old friends in Ohio. We all play together. We have group chat that just goes crazy, and like I'll randomly look at my phone and there'll be 300 text messages that I need to read through. And I like all of that, and it doesn't like affect my mental health. But I will say there was one year where I was actually good and I lost by like a couple points in the Super Bowl. That negatively affected my mental health.
I bet.
Was not happy about that.
Yeah, because you're like so close.
But not in the sense that I was like, I'm never going to play again.
Right.
But do you have anything like that, whether it is fantasy football or maybe you had to tell your husband, you know what, you can't play fantasy football. We can't deal with you in a bad mood for an entire week if you lose.
You can't break another TV.
601-995-1017. I bet another common one, at least for dudes, is golf. I've heard of people getting very frustrated over golf to the point where it is not worth it for them to play golf anymore.
I've heard that golf is that sport that it is like, if you're doing poorly, you're like, I suck at this, I'm horrible, I should never play again. And then the second you have one good shot, you're like, I am the best golfer ever.
Tiger Woods.
Yeah.
Here I come. Do you have a thing like that you had to give up because you loved it, but you didn't like the way it was making you feel?
Yeah. My senior year of high school, right before I was going into it, I made the difficult decision to quit competitive dance. I had started that whenever I was in the third grade. And so my junior year, I was like, I think I've had enough. And it was that year I had broken my ankle. So the first part of the season I was out of commission, and then I just wasn't as good as I used to be. And I had to go through all this physical therapy and all this stuff. And it just got to be too much because at that point you're preparing for college. So school is even harder, and you're trying to take SATs and do college applications. And I just felt like I had zero time for my friends. And I thought, you know what? I love dance. I've done it my whole life, but I miss my friends. So
I was not really involved in any organized activities in high school, but I remember whenever there were certain seniors either on the basketball team or cheerleaders who had cheered their entire high school career, and hearing them say they weren't going to do it their senior year, it just seemed crazy to me. But that does make a lot of sense. It
was both me and my like all-time best friend who decided to do it together. She had been on the swim team her whole life, and her senior year, she was like, you know what? And we just had the best year ever being friends and not having to commit our time to these sports.
601-995-1017. Did you have to give something up that you at one time loved, but then it was just not good for your mental health? I know my grandfather.
What?
A couple years ago. Pap. He loves cutting his grass. He definitely loves it. But my grandmother says that he complains about it hurting his back too much. So she made him hire somebody to cut the grass. One weekend I called him just, a couple months ago, and he's like, well, your grandma's PO'd at me. I bought a new tractor. We were talking about how apparently being bad at fantasy football is bad for your mental health. It can cause a noticeable decline in happiness for people who get too wrapped up in it. We got this very interesting text from somebody who says she wishes her husband would quit fantasy football and she can't convince him to, but whenever he does poorly, he's like in a bad mood until Thursday whenever the fantasy football season restarts. When do you think somebody could tell their partner, hey, you know what? Fantasy football is not for you.
Oh, man.
What has to happen?
I feel like a line has to be crossed, whether that's something in the house gets broken because maybe he, gets mad at the TV and tosses the remote at it and then the screen is totally messed up. Or if he, has an outburst and maybe takes it out on you or one of the kids, like certainly then you could say, okay, look, a line was crossed here.
Okay.
You've got to be done. But other than that, you don't have a leg to stand on, even if they are miserable all the time, because he's going to be like, like, well, but that's my hobby. That's my time with my friends.
Yeah, and whenever I do well, it makes me really happy. So I don't hear you complaining whenever I'm happy after I win. 601-995-1017 is our phone number. It is interesting, though. I feel like fantasy football or fantasy sports in general probably cause a lot of conflict in relationships.
I think, though, I've seen with my friends, the girls who support their men in their fantasy football endeavors and like get excited for them. I even have friends who plan fantasy football parties for their boyfriends and husbands and the other guys in the group. And those are the most successful ones, because even if he does poorly in the fantasy football, he like knows he's got a hype woman behind him.
Did you mean those are the most successful fantasy football players or successful relationships?
Successful relationships. Okay. I have no idea how they're doing in their fantasy football league. I do not pay that much attention to my friends' boyfriends and husbands.
That is really funny. And yeah, I mean, you're running a football team. You need the support behind you.
But seriously, the girlfriends who act like that seem to have happier boyfriends.
Yeah, I've watched the documentaries on football, and what's the guy's name from Miami? His wife was so supportive of him running that football team. Mike something or other.
Yeah.
I can't think of it.
Oh, Mike McDaniels.
Our boss is going to be so mad at us for not knowing her favorite team's coach's name. Oh, no. Can't believe I did that. But yeah, Mike McDaniels' wife, very supportive. That's what your man needs for his fantasy football team.